Hello, everyone, and welcome to the At Matters podcast presented by the Outer Loop Theater Experience, where we create art that matters. I am Rachel Yoder. I am the artistic director of the Outer Loop. And here on At Matters, we just create a space to explore the question, what are we here to do through the lens of art for social change? Today, I have with me a very special guest. Who do I have with me today?
I am Erin FM.
Amazing. We're very excited to have Erin on today. Erin is a Boston-based writer, comedian, and musician who is also currently working with us as one of the writers on the Inner Enso team. So we're thrilled to get to chat with Erin a little bit more today and hear a little bit more about her life and purpose. But first, before we get to that, we have to start with our favorite game, which is 5 things. So Erin, I'm going to throw you a category. Give me the first 5 things that come to mind, and then we will reverse the process. Are you ready?
Right. I'm ready. I got this. I think.
Amazing.
Maybe.
Okay. Nobody's ever ready, which is the point.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So, Erin, 5 things that you learned while you were living abroad in Shanghai.
Ooh, so many things. I learned so many things. Well, so one is that there are a lot of things about the way that we live here that are not necessarily, that we take for granted as being universal, that are not necessarily universal.
Mm-hmm.
I learned how awesome very unsanitary street food is. It's delicious.
It's facts.
My favorite thing for breakfast was this thing called jambing, which is like a pancake that somebody breaks an egg on and then puts some crispy stuff on and then put some like hoisin sauce on and like some other like little like green onions, and then they roll it up into like a burrito kind of thing. And it is always made outside by an old lady who doesn't wash her hands on like the backside of like an oil drum, like that probably had chemicals in it. Doesn't matter. It's delicious. It's the most delicious thing you'll ever have in your whole life.
I believe you. It sounds that way.
Yeah. 3, I learned that it is not always easy to make art in other countries in the same way, but that some things are much easier. So finding people to work with who have free time and resources to spare and all of that was actually easier. But having to record your presentation, translate it into Chinese, get it approved by the government to be able to work in a state-run theater was a bit of a headache. There were black box theaters that were privately owned that you could still do shows in if you weren't using big ones. But yeah, definitely like being an artist was much easier in some ways, but also like much more of a hassle in other ways. Was that 3 so far? 4, I learned how it feels to not be struggle class. Because I grew up very poor, and then I was, of course, like poor all through college because I was a struggling student who paid for everything myself, never got any help from my parents. And then after graduating college, couldn't find amazing jobs that would help me pay my student loans off that were massive. And in China, I was paid very well, usually at a company apartment. Often had a lot of extra work thrown my way, like teaching SAT classes and things like that. And that lifestyle felt very different than life here. Life here, it seems like even the middle class is just struggling a lot. And then, yeah, the last thing I learned was that because I was just offered things I did not deserve over there, because it was just such a friendly art environment for artists, I've learned that paying your dues is bullshit. and that you should just go do it. Like, just go do the thing. Don't wait for somebody to tell you you have permission to go do the thing. You should just go do the thing. I had friends who wanted me to walk in fashion shows for them. I am 5'6" and I was like 135 pounds at the time. I'm bigger now, but like, I was like, I'm not a model. I don't have model proportions. They're like, who cares? You're cute. Let's go. Let's run. Do the thing. We'll put you in taller heels. We'll put you in taller heels than everyone else. And, you know, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm a runway model now. That's fun. Same thing with voiceover artistry. Like, they were like, you have a clear voice and you can do a lot of different things with it. We're going to pay you to do voiceover. And like, I just had things constantly being offered to me that I would not have thought to go after. And now I think to go after them. I used to kind of sit around and say, well, if it's not my number one passion, you know, I feel like a fraud if I call myself anything. And you're not a fraud. Just go do the stuff. Paying your dues has its pluses, I guess. But it is also kind of bullshit.
Those are good. Those are good 5 lessons. Very nice. Do you have one for me?
I have some for you. All right.
Ready.
You obviously you've got your lovely little fingers in this pie from so many angles. Tell me your top 5 hardest parts of being on multiple sides of art making.
Yeah, top 5 hardest parts of being on multiple sides of art making. I would say number 1 is balancing them all, because I love being on multiple sides of it so much, but I feel like I get drawn into one thing and then I'm like, oh, I've only been doing this one thing for a while and I miss the other things. So like now I have to make time for the other things. And sometimes then I go really far into the one thing that I've been missing. And then I'm like, whoops, I forgot to do all the other ones. So trying to find what is the right balance, which is, I think, just like a constant negotiation. That's one. I feel like that's 1 through 5.
Yeah, right.
Like, honestly, like that's the whole thing. It's just like trying to find the balance. Being on multiple sides of art making. Also like having to code switch between roles is like, okay, when I'm in just actor mode, that's like a very different set of rules and expectations and behaviors than when I have to flip into, you know, like a leadership role, or when I have to flip into like a producing role, something like that. So it's like a different set of languages and requirements for each role. 3, I would say, like sometimes is like not being able to turn off the other mind. So like I should be in one mind, I should be just in like, you know, actor mind, but like part of my mind is like, yeah, but like the writing, or like you know, like it's doing other things that it shouldn't be doing. Number 4, I would say it's like sort of related to that, but just the like some roles in the art making process that I'm involved in require, it would be better if my emotions were more turned off. And some of them require more emotionality and more open-heartedness, and sometimes I have to flip between 2 of those in a day, multiple times a day. So that's not always easy to turn on and off. And I guess I would also say it's hard to navigate. Sometimes they all require so much energy, and that's a lot of output of energy. So navigating like when is reset time, when is downtime from all of this like output that's happening. Yeah. Oh, I like that one. Those are my things. Amazing. Okay, great. Well, we want to chat with you today. We just want to hear a little bit more about you, get to know you a little bit better, learn a little bit more about your story and your purpose as an artist, because I have a little insider info and I know it's very interesting and I would like to share that with a wider audience. So we just want to jump right in and get into it. So just to start us off, if you could just give us like a little introduction of yourself, kind of where you from, how do you identify as an artist? How did you kind of get from where you started to where you are now? Give us a little context.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Canada with my dad's side of the family. We sort of like switched things up and moved to West Virginia for a while when I was in kindergarten, all the way through third grade. And I was at this like kind of hippie commune kind of place called Claymont, where they did this thing called the basic course. That's where I got to meet Thich Nhat Hanh. Got to meet a lot of really cool like Buddhist spiritual leaders who we're not all as famous as Thich Nhat Hanh, but equally awesome to meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents were like, Gurdjieff people, and stuff like that. Very much into like the Bennetts and
Mm-hmm.
hippie stuff. But like, spiritual, enlightening hippie stuff. A lot of reading various translations of Rumi. Yeah, my parents are very weird people. My dad especially is a very weird person, but I love him to death. And then we moved to Georgia in third grade, and I grew up in Athens, Georgia, which is a big arts town. It's a music town. It's a college town. So there's a lot of great resources around. And I started at the University of Georgia, went through a bunch of crazy stuff my junior year. And I've always, I guess my sophomore year, and I've always sort of like, at the time, one of my coping mechanisms was having big goals. Because if I had like a massive goal, then like I could use it to distract myself. So I had a friend die and a bunch of other really bad stuff was going on. And I applied to NYU as a transfer student and got in. Weirdly, was not expecting to. I was just expecting it to get me past that rough period, but I was accepted. And so I went and then realized I am a poor kid who had my bills turned off growing up and had to take cold showers. And the other kids here are not like that. They do not have that life experience. And I could not afford to stay, even though I made the dean's list and, did really well. So I transferred back to Georgia for my senior year and got a comparative literature degree and a philosophy degree. And then basically a little couple years after that, moved to China for 10 years. And had my son while I was over there, and then kind of moved back. While I was in China, I was doing stand-up comedy, and that lifestyle was it's a lot of late nights and a lot of like drinking and being around people drinking. And I knew I kind of didn't want to be in that environment forever because I had a small child. So I started writing teleplays. I started taking classes at UCLA Extension, took various like TV writing and TV business classes over there while I was in China, and then started writing, pilots. And then when I moved back to America, I moved to New York, and a friend of mine who is a Broadway producer told me, why don't you write plays? You're in New York. Just write plays. He's like, why are you trying to write teleplays? Why are you trying to write screenplays? Just write plays. You're here. And so I said, you know what? I should write plays. And so I started writing plays. And really mostly during the pandemic, I applied to an MFA program and got into that. Didn't have enough material even to do my first workshop at school during residency. So I had to like write a bunch of plays, like just to be ready for my first semester residency. Because I didn't even have, 25 pages of material or whatever they wanted. And now I have like a big chunky portfolio full of stuff I'm really proud of, and some stuff I'm okay with not opening up again.
Wow.
Yeah, that's about it. And then, yes.
So much there. Such an interesting path to where you are now. Is that so, it sounds like there was you had a lot of different creative interests that have all influenced, where you are now. Would you say that you have a sort of favorite creative realm that you live in? Is it right now playwriting, or like how do you feel like you most identify as an artist currently?
Um, I mean, it's hard for me to the weird thing is it's like my brain has it logged to where the only thing that matters is training, and whatever you're trained in is your thing, and your expertise. And I'm like, well, I have an MFA in writing for stage and screen, so obviously playwriting is what I consider myself. But like, I love writing songs. I just have no formal musical training. I learned chords. I learned what makes up a key. I learned, I looked up a bunch of songs and written songs that had the same chord progressions or had the same chords in them, and kind of picked my own progressions and kind of did it from like being a fan of music. And uh, so it's like, it's so weird that like I have these two things that I really, really love. And like one of them I have a master's degree in, and the other one I have literally no formal training that I've ever paid someone to give me. And I feel equally like passionate about both of them.
I I'm like sitting over here just for anyone who's watching the YouTube version of this and is watching my face, like yes, I am gobsmacked because had no idea that you had no formal musical training. And I mean, I never would have guessed that in a million years, because I've seen some of your music, and it very much appears to the naked eye like you've had many, many years of musical training. That's phenomenal. Don't you have a band as well, don't you?
I am in a band. I'm the singer in the band though, so it's mostly their work. I've only been with them for a fairly short time, so we've been bringing my songs in slowly. Um, but but yeah, they're great to work with. I just like being with, like, doing things where the project is with people. And I get to like be with a group of people because I like being with people.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. So, you what brought you to Shanghai initially? I know you sort of mentioned your path there, and then you kind of like fast forwarded, and then suddenly you were there. So, what kind of bridge the gap for us a little bit? What kind of made
Yeah.
you tend in that direction?
So, like I said, like I've never really gotten I've gotten emotional support from my parents in the past, especially my dad, but not a lot of financial support. I got my first job at 16, and basically since then, I've paid for all of my own bills and paid for all of my own college. And my parents are divorced, and like my mother was a renter. My father was in Canada. And for my late teens and early 20s, we didn't have like the best relationship. We have an amazing relationship now, but we were not in an awesome place in my late teens and early 20s. So graduating from college, to a recession in
Mm.
2008, I didn't have my childhood bedroom to go back to if I couldn't get a job right away.
Mm.
Or I couldn't take out like a short-term loan from my parents, or like ask them to cover my rent and I'll cover my bills, or whatever. There was no sort of like system in place sort of protecting me from the recession that was happening.
Mm.
I just couldn't find work that would help me pay my student loans. And I heard a friend, basically one of my ex-boyfriends in Georgia, who is a wonderful college professor named Dr. Smith. I won't tell anyone, but his name is Dr. Smith. And he told me about a friend of ours that we were in a band with back then, whose sister had gone to co-teach in China. And
Mm.
so I called her up or emailed her and said, "Hey, how did you teach in China?" And she connected me with the program that she applied through. And then the crazy thing was is that woman, who was my friend's girlfriend's sister, of a guy I was in a band with back in college, when I got pregnant with Felix, uh, I went to them because they had kids in China. And I once again came to them for support and said, "Hey guys, I know you got me over here. Now I'm pregnant and I don't quite know what's going on. Can you give me some more advice?" Her name was Sarah Zuber, I believe, and her husband's name was Steven, and they were lovely, lovely people, and they really helped me out.
Hmm.
So yeah.
What was that experience like of, finding out you're pregnant and being, in on your own in another country? What was that journey like for you?
The crazy thing is I loved it because
Mm,
I was just so drunk on the financial security
mm,
that I felt like I could do anything because
mm,
I had been so like housing insecure, income insecure for my entire life, and like being in a position where I had a company apartment, I had the unlimited ability to get awesome jobs
mm,
that paid well, that they were just like handing out,
mm,
and I was just so like I knew I wouldn't have that level of financial security and job security in America.
mm,
So I actually felt really good. I didn't even notice really that I didn't have a partner around or didn't have my parents around or anything like that. I had so many friends and I lived in a teacher dorm. And the wonderful thing about living in a teacher dorm is that people will bake you dishes or make you dinner and leave you a plate like at your door once you have a baby, because
mm,
you know every single person in the entire building because they're all your colleagues.
mm,
So I had some like, and it was safe for my son to run up and down the hallways when he was
mm,
little because I knew every single person in the building. So I didn't have to worry that one of our neighbors was a creep or hated children, or, they were all teachers. So they all
mm,
liked children. And they were all people I knew and liked. There were other expats who were like-minded people, and it was pretty great. It was kind of I always called Shanghai Disneyland for adults. And that situation of just knowing you're in a very safe environment and you're
mm,
gonna be okay and you're gonna have enough money, and it's like everything else could be fun.
mm.
And I had never experienced that before in my entire life.
That's pretty remarkable, hearing you describe that. And I think that's there's a lot there in terms of what, a little bit of safety, security, and stability can do for someone, especially an
Mhm.
artist. It's like there are so many people who have got all this talent, all this creative energy inside of them, but are missing those things. And the world then misses out on what those people might be able to create and bring forth
Yeah.
into the world, because of that. Particularly that financial security piece is just such an elusive beast, for
Yeah.
many artists, especially if you grew up in anything other than a very highly privileged environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I literally I knew I wanted to, because as a kid I grew up like acting and stuff and doing community theater, which is why it's extra heartbreaking to me now that community theater and school theater charges kids.
Mhm,
You know, People
mhm,
have to pay $150 to be in the musical or whatever. I would not have been able to afford that.
mhm,
You know, my
mhm,
family would not have been able to afford $150 to be in the fall play or the spring musical.
mhm,
And so it's extra heartbreaking to me knowing that like there are so many artists out there that can't develop into artists,
mhm,
because it literally never clicked for me that I could do anything until suddenly I didn't have that hanging over me, like
mhm,
all that stress of needing to be practical and like get your head straight and like do something that's gonna help. Um, it's sort of like what Bloom's taxonomy or Maslow's hierarchy,
Yeah,
or
exactly. Mhm,
it's like if you can't get past like these basic things, your brain can't be free, you know.
mhm,
That creativity is not going to pour out of you. I mean, it does with certain people. There's certain people you hear about them like living out of their car or like starving and uh doing crazy stuff to get noticed, but I would say most people don't have that in them, like to believe, like you have to be a special kind of crazy to believe in yourself despite extreme, circumstances and poverty and adversity.
It's true.
Like,
It's true. And I think so often those, the couple of stories that we hear about people who like against all odds were able to like somehow have literally zero money and still be brilliant. I mean, that is like the very small minority. And it just speaks to, if we as a society were able to have a better infrastructure to support people, especially artists, then what else might we have from people,
yeah.
to be able to express their creativity.
Although I will say I also do probably stand up for Nepo babies more than I should. Because like I said, grinded it out, grew up really poor, but also I stand up for Nepo babies all the time because it's like everyone else is allowed to have a family business. Why aren't they? Like we
Yeah.
don't shame plumbers for naming their company Johnson and Sons and bringing their sons on board, and keeping that being the family business and going. So it's like, why are we mad at actors, kids who are genuinely talented just because their parents are also in the business? That seems a little unfair to me.
It's a good point. And it's also just that, it's like, it's that scarcity mentality of we've got this assumption that, oh, well, if this person's kid has that job, then there's somehow less for the rest of us. But what we actually should be focused on is creating an environment where we all have opportunity and that there's enough for everybody. The water level rises for everybody.
Yeah.
So how long were you in Shanghai with your son? And then when did you return? And then what was that kind of return process back to the culture, a little bit of a different culture back in the States? What was that kind of like for you?
It's hard to say because I moved there in 2009, came back in 2018. So I was there for 9 years, but I sent my son to live with his dad for that last year so that he could start kindergarten in an environment where he could learn to read and write English properly, and not have to learn it like secondhand or me pay for an international school that I couldn't afford, because international schools are like $30,000 a year plus sometimes in Shanghai. So I sent him to live with his dad while I was transitioning back. And then sort of like the second I moved back, I moved to Georgia because I was engaged to my middle school crush that I had somehow finally landed. And because of that, because he was a middle school crush, I didn't realize all these red flags that were, oh, he's probably not as committed to this as I am. It was not his fault, though. He had severe mental illness as well as addiction, but he was 4 years sober, alcoholic. But having any little minor conflict, sort of having it happen within our union, made it extra stressful for him in a way that made him have urges to drink that he had not had in years. And he was like, I'm sorry. I thought I could handle being in a relationship. I think I need to be alone. And he was right. To this day, he's actually still alone. He has family and friends around him, but what that meant is that the second I got back to America, where I was planning on having this wonderfully happy life that I'd always envisioned for myself and get bring Felix back down to come live with me, all of a sudden I was a single person with no friends, no job, nowhere to live. And my son was living with his dad, and his dad was like, we're going to keep him. We like him. He's got friends here. And unless I could provide a better life, I didn't really have much of an argument against that. I couldn't really push for him living with me when I was barely surviving living in a crappy, tiny bedroom with young people in their 20s in Jersey City, because I moved back, after that happened in Georgia. Obviously I moved back and tried to get closer to Felix where his dad was, and they were in Queens, and my friend that I knew was in New Jersey. So I moved to Jersey City and had this tiny little bedroom. So I went from like having everything in China. I had friends, my comedy community, I had a wonderful job, I had tons of security, like my life was kind of perfect. And then moved here and suddenly I lost everything. No friends, no job, no apartment, no car, no life, no kid, and nothing I could do about it. So it was pretty shocking and jarring. For sure.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it would be. I mean, that's even more than just the culture shock. That's a lot of life stressors on top of that. How did you
Yeah.
navigate that transition? That seems to me like it would be insurmountable for a lot of people, but how did you kind of climb your way out of that?
I don't even know if I still have. I think I'm still kind of traumatized from it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, but my son's still with his dad, you know.
Mm,
They kind of locked in and took hold I still haven't really quite gotten over that.
mm,
And it has been tough. It's definitely been tough. The only thing that has gotten me out of it at all is making art.
mm,
Because if I don't see my son as much as I want to because I'm writing all night or because I'm making props or because I'm doing something to make a piece of art that I'm proud of, it doesn't hurt as badly
mm,
because it hurts all the time, but like it's a good distraction.
mm,
So like it's literally I'd say the only thing that has given me any sense of identity after that because I was a comedian. Well, suddenly I get back to America and I try to go to comedy clubs and everybody is just garbage. Like everybody is trying to get paid before they're worth paying for.
mm,
And the style is like everyone's trying to be Bill Burr and they think comedy is, being offensive and just being kind of a dick. And that's not what comedy is to me. I couldn't find a good comedy community when I got back to the States. So that part of my identity I lost. I was Felix's mom and took care of him every day, and I'd lost that part of my identity. So I just felt like sort of a shell.
mm,
And so the only thing that kind of brought me out of that was starting to write plays and getting back to that part of myself that made me feel really good in Shanghai when I was, either writing stand up or when I was writing the pilots and stuff. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Like, and again, doing the same thing I did with the NYU thing, which was applying to an MFA program and doing school.
mm,
So, yeah, that was really the only thing that really got me out of it.
mm. Well, I know that art for a lot of people is something that they go to as that solace, as that, thing that makes you feel like a person when nothing else does. And so it possibly that's the reason why, I mean, I've been exposed to not as much as I would like, but some of your art, and it does resonate on that deep human level. So wherever that's sort of that wellspring that it's coming from for you, um, is a gift to everyone who gets to experience it. Um, when we like to talk a lot about purpose on this podcast and, what is our purpose as an artist? When you sit with that question, especially given what you just shared, how do you sort of for yourself define like your purpose as an artist, what you feel you're here to do?
Well, I always, I think I have this in like my NPX bio or something, but what you said just reminded me of it is that I always say, like, when we go to the theater, it is a broken adult that is sitting down in that chair, but it is an inner child that's there to see the show.
Mhm.
So it's a broken adult sitting down. It's the inner child that's there to heal and that's there to enjoy it and get excited and, really like take full advantage of the night, So I that's why I think I'm kind of drawn to stuff that like deals with our darkest feelings in a way that's sort of cartoony and fun and absurd and as crazy as the world can strike us when we're not in a good place, you know? Because like, you know, I always loved Alice in Wonderland. And so like I love stuff like that where the most terrifying thing for a child is to be in a scary environment that they don't recognize. But when it's populated with crazy creatures, and you're jumping from sort of one world to the next, and you never know what size you're going to be, and you never know where you're going to land. Like, I feel like a lot of us feel like that all the time. So I like writing stuff that like captures that, or tries to sort of like, yeah.
We have a special treat for all of our listeners because we are at the end of this episode in just a few minutes. We're going to get to hear an excerpt from one of Erin's pieces. So you'll get to hear a little bit of Erin's purpose through her writing when we get to that. Thank you so much. We're going to wind down and then we're going to give our listeners a chance to listen to that piece. But really, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing in this conversation with us. I know that you've given me a lot to think about from your life's journey. So I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you.
Reminder to everyone listening that you can follow us. We release new episodes every Thursday, wherever you get your podcasts. Please remember to follow us on social media. Also, Erin, where can our listeners find you on social media if they want to follow more of your work?
I am on Instagram and TikTok as at Erin FM Comedy, all one word, ERIN FM, like a radio station, and then comedy. That's TikTok and Instagram. That's probably where I put most things. I also have a new Play Exchange website where you can actually read my work. There's like downloadable PDFs, and you can see my artistic statement and my bio, and a goofy picture of me from when I did a TED Talk. So that's just, you know, you can just Google New Play Exchange. It's orange. It's NPX. I think it's npx.com. I'm doing a very bad job of this. Yes, great. But mostly TikTok and Instagram at Erin FM Comedy.
Amazing. And do you have a call to action to leave our audience with? Something you'd like people to think about or do this week?
Dear God, vote. Register to vote if you haven't voted yet. Request your, you know, if you know you're not going to have time, go ahead and request your vote from home ballot, your vote by mail ballot if you haven't already. Just please vote.
Amen. Perfect call to action. Stick around. We are going to hop right in to an excerpt from Erin's play. Thank you all for listening.
This is a scene from my play, Temporarium. It's scene 14. It is called Fête, like party, accompli. We are in Baldwin's home. Mamie and her shadow enter. Baldwin is wearing a tuxedo.
I'm back.
I was job hunting without my help.
I got a job. Then I fled it.
Can't say I'm entirely surprised. Put your dress on. We have an event. Thought it might lift your spirits. I pulled the best piece I could find. It's on your bed.
Which dress?
The ivory one with the lace.
That's my wedding dress. I can't put that on.
Well, you certainly can't wear anything else from that bag.
I really don't want to.
Repurposing it could be good for you. Go, it's starting.
Mamie stands frozen. She and Shadow exit. As first guest, second guest, third guest, and fourth guest enter, a panel shows an ornate monogram figure that says BM. Baldwin, you old so-and-so.
Delighted you could come. Please help yourself to hors d'oeuvres.
Keep this one away from the crab cakes. Oh, quiet you. Third guest approaches Baldwin.
Oh, Mr. Samotki, I was able to locate that poem from the Marquis to his love slave.
Wonderful news.
Just let me know which lines you think are best.
No, don't spoil it. Mamie enters wearing the wedding dress. Shadow trails behind. The guests applaud. Mamie points at the BM figure.
What is this?
For Baldwin and Mamie. It's not going to stay up. It's just for the ceremony.
BM.
The fourth guest approaches and Baldwin walks away.
Oh my, look at you.
What is this?
Don't be nervous. Everyone feels a little scatterbrained right before. You'll be fine.
Please help me. I think Baldwin is forcing me to marry him.
He could never do a thing like that. He's quite wealthy.
What does that have to do with anything?
You're not making any sense, dear. The fourth guest gently squeezes Maney's arm and walks away. Maney's frozen. Shadow walks around and mimes the following in front of her. Because she's her shadow, she of course does not see.
Sometimes you'll find yourself standing still in front of a door that is most definitely not automatic, waiting for it to open before finally having the thought, what is wrong with me? I used to be so much sharper, and now I'm walking into walls.
Baldwin passes her and she snaps out of it.
Baldwin, what is this?
We're getting married, of course. I love you.
No, you
How do you
don't.
know you love me?
I know I love you like I know it's winter when there are cabbages in all the flower pots.
I know it's winter when it feels cold.
You women always basing everything on your feelings.
Aren't feelings the most relevant thing here? I didn't ask for this. Who are all these people?
You're lucky anyone showed up. Everyone knows how you are.
How I am? But my friends and family aren't even here.
She starts to take an accepting step toward him.
Get back here.
Shadow takes Maney's skirt in their hands.
I called your mother, but she said she couldn't come because you're just doing it for the attention.
She's not doing it at all.
I don't want attention. You're not even supposed to be seeing me right now. None of this is right.
Shadow pulls the dress, drawing Maney closer.
I've really let you use me. You just want to lay around getting drunk on my champagne, eating my mermaid caviar.
I don't even... This isn't right.
Darling, we've all gotten a front row seat to your sense of right. It's better this way.
I don't want to marry you.
Well, you were engaged to poor, what's-his-name. You said you wanted to get married, and now you're saying you don't?
I wanted to marry the person I wanted to marry.
That's irrelevant. You're changing the subject to distract from how guilty you feel. Look at what you're wearing. Make up your mind.
You're my first cousin.
A great deal of families of high breeding, such as ours, practice marriage between cousins. It's seen as expected, even ideal.
I don't want to marry my cousin.
So you think you're better than a queen? I can give you a long list of scientists, presidents, explorers who searched the world over for a living and still married their cousins. You don't know what it means to preserve our bloodline. We are the great ×8 descendants of the Emperor Zilla the Atrocious.
His name was Zilla the Atrocious?
Indeed.
How is that good? It sounds like he was atrocious.
Yes, but he was emperor.
Shadow pulls Maney back.
I'm really sorry if I've been a distraction. I can go. Please just let me get my things.
I would, but my conscience won't let me.
How is this about
your conscience?
You say you want to leave, but you are wicked and morally unbalanced. Thus, all your desires are corrupt. Ergo, staying and marrying me is the morally right thing to do. You don't see that?
Shadow feels each word of Baldwin's attack.
I didn't do anything wrong.
Darling, that's not the same as doing something right.
End of Act 1 and end of scene.